Today I'm going to show you how to make sourdough tiger bread rolls. They're so soft in the middle, but with a crunchy topping. They're awesome. Hi, I'm Sune, and I'm a food geek. If you're new to this channel, I bake a lot of sourdough bread and I make delicious food from all over the world. My quest is to get the most out of every ingredient, and I want to teach you how to do that in simple and understandable steps. So join me by subscribing and ringing the bell so you won't miss any future videos. Today we're going to be making tiger bread rolls with sourdough starter. If you don't have a sourdough starter, you can find my guide on making one right here. It's easier than you think. So tiger bread rolls are essentially a regular soft roll, but they have a special topping that when it's baked, it crackles and it turns super crunchy. Because of the toasted sesame oil in the topping, it has an intoxicating smell. They go under a few different names. In the Netherlands, where they come from, they're known as tiger bread or tiger rolls. In the UK, they're known as giraffe bread, and in the States, they're known as Marco Polo bread or Dutch crunch. The dough is an enriched dough with milk and eggs, and it's sitting at a comfortable 66% hydration. That means the dough is tacky but not sticky, which means that it's fairly easy to work with. When you use milk in bread dough, you really need to scald the milk. There's certain proteins in the milk that will hinder the gluten development. So if you heat the milk to 82 Celsius, about 180 degrees Fahrenheit, those proteins will denature and won't interfere with the gluten development. The reason we use milk and eggs in this recipe is because it gives a softer and fluffier crumb. But the dough's really easy to make, so let's get started.
The written recipe, the ingredients, and the amounts are linked in the description. Before you start on this recipe, you need to scald the milk. You should scald about 450 grams of milk. Bring it to 82 degrees Celsius, about 180 degrees Fahrenheit, and put it in a heat-proof bowl and leave it to cool. Add an egg to the milk and large whisk it in. To a bowl, add 560 grams of bread flour. To that, add 95 grams of spelt flour and 15 grams of sea salt. Give it a good mix with your hand so that it's all good and combined. Pour in the milk mixture and add 150 grams of mature sourdough starter on top. Now mix the dough with your hand so that all the flour is completely hydrated. You don't need to knead it or anything, it should just be what's called a shaggy mess. And that doesn't mean that you should be. Put a damp dish towel over top and let it rest for 30 minutes. Now we're into the bulk fermentation, and you should do 4 sets of stretch and folds. We'll start with the first one. As you can see, the dough is really still a shaggy mess. We'll do it this way. First you wet your hands, and then you loosen the dough from the bottom of the bowl. And then you pull up the back of the dough and fold it in over itself. Turn the bowl about 45 degrees and stretch again. Then keep going, turn 45 degrees, stretch and fold, and turn 45 degrees and stretch and fold. That's it. And then you put the dish towel over top and leave it to rest for another 30 minutes. The second, third, and fourth stretch and folds are done exactly the same way. After the fourth stretch and fold, we'll do a window pane test to see if the gluten development is where it should be. So grab a piece of the dough and pull it slowly and feel the strength of the dough. You can feel if it sticks together or if it wants to tear. If just you can stretch it out, then go slowly until it's very thin. If that's good, that means the gluten development is great. If at this point your dough still doesn't have great gluten development, I'd do 1 or 2 more stretches and folds. Then after the dough passes the window pane test, you should leave it to ferment and to rise. And I usually let it rise for about 5 hours, counting from the first stretch and fold. But have a look at your dough. It should rise somewhere between 50 and 100%. It really depends on the strength of your starter. After the fermentation is done, you should put the dough in the fridge and leave it overnight. And the next morning, grab the dough from the fridge and divide it into 12 equally sized pieces. Around 100 grams of dough for each piece. I like to measure it out because then all the buns get to be the same size, but you can do it, however you want to. Then with each piece, you shape it into a round by grabbing the piece of dough and pushing the dough up into the inside. You can see how I'm doing it here. You sort of push the dough inside and then you turn it a little bit and then you do another part, push that inside. You keep going until the surface is reasonably taut. And you continue with all the other buns. Put them on a baking sheet lined with parchment paper. Once they're all shaped, put a damp dish towel over top and leave them to rest for 15 minutes. Then we'll do the final shape. You grab a dough ball and you put it on your unfloured counter. Put your hand like a claw over top and kind of make circles with your hand so that the dough gets teased into a round. It'll get really round if you do it properly, so just keep trying. It's not so difficult once you try it. Place it back on the baking sheet and continue with the other 11 dough balls. Once they're all shaped, put a damp dish towel over the top and leave them to rise for 1.5 hours. Preheat your oven to 200 degrees Celsius, about 400 degrees Fahrenheit, or gas mark 6 if you're in the UK, and add an empty pan at the bottom. We're going to be using that for steaming. Once the 1.5 hours are up, we should make the topping. Put 1 packet or 7 grams of active dry yeast in a bowl, 100 grams of lukewarm water, 105 grams of rice flour, 15 grams of brown sugar, 14 grams of neutral cooking oil, and 14 grams of toasted sesame oil, and the last thing is 4 grams of salt. Mix it with a spoon until it's completely combined. We need sort of a close to pourable texture, so if it's too thick, then put a little extra water in, a tablespoon at a time. Mix it up, see how it is, and keep going. If it's really thin, then you could add some rice flour, but the way the recipe is made, it should be pretty thick when you start out, so that you can get to the right consistency. Once you have the right consistency, leave the mixture to infuse for about 15 minutes. Once the 15 minutes are up, wrap your now risen buns and spread the mixture over top. It shouldn't be a super thick layer, but yeah, I mean, you're probably not going to use all of the topping, but put as much on as you want. I use a pastry brush to kind of spread it over top. Alright, so the last thing to do before you put them in the oven is boil a pot of water. Add the water to the pan at the bottom and put the buns in. Bake for 20 minutes, and if you think they need more color, you can bake them for longer. If you like to check the internal temperatures to see if they're done, they should be at 98 degrees Celsius, about 208 degrees Fahrenheit to be done. Alright, so that's all that there is to making tiger bread rolls, but the only thing that's left is a B-roll. Are you ready?